Okay, Jim, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is our second forum that we're holding. We held one last night for parents of elementary students. We had over 300 participants in that meeting, both on the YouTube channel and through the Zoom link. And so today we are running this for the secondary folks. This is grades 7 through 12. And we are going to limit the questions to the 7 through 12 scenarios. The session that we ran last night was taped. It was live on YouTube. It is still available on YouTube. This one is being recorded as well. It is also being shown on YouTube, and both links will be posted on the website tomorrow, so anyone can view either presentation at any time going forward. Just so that everybody knows who is on the call, I am Jim Aronakis, I'm the superintendent. I am not visible because I am at my home. I was supposed to have cable and internet installed at my home on the day that I had no power due to the storm. So I'm operating from a hotspot on my cell phone. And when the video is on, you can't hear a word that I'm saying. We did a test on this yesterday. So I'm here, but not visible. We also have Maria Hearn. She's the director of curriculum. She's helping to coordinate the waiting room, and she will be monitoring the chat room as well. And our technology director, Jeremy Taylor, is also co-hosting, and he's here for technical support as well. And he's monitoring the questions that are coming to us from the YouTube presentation. So what we are going to do this evening is spend a little bit of time just giving an overview of the planning process and the different scenarios. I am sure that many of you or all of you have read through the reentry plan, particularly for the school or schools for which your children will be attending. Many of you have submitted questions, which we have incorporated into what's going to be said tonight during this presentation. However, throughout the meeting, we have access to the chat room, so feel free to continue to type questions into the chat room, and we will do our best to answer all of those questions to the best of our ability. There are still some things that we're unsure of, and it's not because we are not trying to get the answers, but we are relying on other people to provide answers for us. So I will explain where we are with respect to those issues during the presentation. You can also use the raise hand feature. Those of you that are on the Zoom call can use the raise hand feature. And then Marie, can you tell everyone what the steps are if they're on their phone?
Sure. So to raise your hand, you would press *9 on your phone. And since we have everyone muted, you would then press *6 to ask your question. So again, it's *9 to raise your hand and you will be recognized, and *6 to unmute.
Okay, thanks. Anything else that I need to go over in terms of the logistics, or are we good to start?
I think we're good to start.
Okay. All right, so let's spend a couple of minutes kind of talking through where we are at the present time. We were all required, every school district in the state of Rhode Island was required to submit multiple reentry plans. And those plans are designed so that depending on where we are in the state, in terms of the spread of the virus, in terms of the readiness of the state and of the individual municipality to open, we have a plan for basically every scenario. That was the charge that we were given. We had a total of over 75 individuals representing administration, teaching staff, support staff, parents, many parents, who participated on 10 different subcommittees going through the guidance and addressing all of the issues that we needed to address as part of our reentry plans. And those plans were submitted to the state on the 17th of July. And I think on that date, or right around that date, I also released the plans to the public so that you all had access to what was submitted. One thing that I want to stress is that these plans continue to be a work in progress. They are considered drafts because we are still in the process of revising and clarifying based on ongoing feedback. For example, we received some feedback last night relative to the elementary plans, and we are making some adjustments based on that feedback. We'll do the same tonight if it is appropriate based on the feedback and questions that people have during this conversation. Additionally, we were waiting, so we submitted on the 17th. We were waiting for feedback from the Department of Education, who is working closely with the Department of Health. That feedback came to us on the 28th of July, and the secondary plans were, I don't want to say approved because they're not approving the plans, but there was no feedback for us in terms of necessary improvements to what we submitted. There were some things that we needed to address in the elementary plan, so we talked about that at last night's meeting, but the secondary plan as written was acceptable. So let's talk through the various scenarios. The requirements for us were that we needed to address full distance learning. So full distance learning would only occur if a family has requested it, or if the governor shuts down schools, as she did in March of the last school year. We are not anticipating that that's how we're going to start the school year, but we need to be prepared for full distance learning in the event that there is a spike in cases and that the state is in a place similar to, or unfortunately in a worse situation than we were in last March when the decision was made to close schools. However, we learned a lot during those 3 months that we did distance learning, and we gathered quite a bit of feedback from families along the way, both during the first week and then even in the summer after distance learning was over. There were some questions on surveys that we sent out, and we took that information very seriously and identified several themes, things that families really wanted in terms of improvements in our delivery of distance learning. All of those things have been incorporated into our new distance learning plan, which basically is the same plan that was submitted with an explanation of the changes that we're making going forward in the event that we need to move to distance learning. Those changes are also highlighted in our submission that we sent to RIDE in the Department of Health on the 17th. The new plans that we needed to submit were for a limited in-person return, for a partial return, and for a full return. The difference at the secondary schools is that the partial return and the full return could look very much the same. And there is a reason for that, which I will explain. But what I want to do is start with limited return. That is, other than full distance learning where schools are completely shut down, that is the situation where the fewest number of children can return to school, and the restrictions and the guidelines that we have to follow are the most strict. So that would indicate that we are moving backwards, perhaps, and that the precautions that we need to take are much more significant. Again, I do not anticipate, based on recent conversations, I don't anticipate that that's the place where we're going to begin the school year. But in the event that we need to move in that direction, it's important that everybody understands what that would entail. So limited in person would mean that only selected students are coming to school, and they're coming to school every day of the week. The students that we would be targeting are the students who have been identified by the school, by classroom teachers, by special education teachers, by school administrators, in consultation with parents as well. These students have been identified as most in need, and most in need does not mean that that they must have an individual education plan. It does not mean that they must have special education needs. It does not mean that they must be a learner of English as a second language. What it means is that on an individual basis, the consensus is that these particular students need more direct interaction with their teacher, and so benefit most from in-person learning, so that we can limit the amount of regression or gaps that might occur if they were learning completely through distance learning. So again, these are for targeted students only. And as I explained in last night's forum, there will be an opportunity for families to also make their case. So if there is a request from a family based on academic and or significant social emotional concerns, there will be a very short form. I call it an application, but it's not an application, it's a request for you to express what your concerns are, and for you to express your desire for your child to be considered for the full in-person learning, even in the limited return model. It's basically a one-pager, it's 3 questions. And as a follow-up, once we receive those requests, there will be consultation directly with you so that a decision can be made. Again, we have very limited numbers of students that we are allowed to bring in under the limited return model, based on the strict guidelines and the crowd size. But there will be an opportunity again for students that we've identified and students that parents have identified to come in for full-time learning. Those applications or request forms that I just referenced are going out to families at the beginning of next week. We wanted to wait for both of these forums to happen, and there's also going to be another brief survey based on similar questions that you've already answered, but we're only asking families to respond if they're changing their opinion. That's the question about, are you selecting distance learning, or are you sending your child into school for in-person learning, whatever the scenario is at the time. The second scenario is partial return. So partial return means that more kids can enter the school. However, there are still limitations and guidelines that we have to follow. And I want to talk a little bit about those guidelines, the things that we needed to consider as we were making our decisions around reentry. There are really 3 mitigation themes that showed up in the guidance multiple times. The first is the issue of pods. So podding means that groups of students stay together for basically the entire day. So a group of 30 students, 15 students, whatever the number is, and under partial return, it can be up to 30. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't say students, 30 humans, meaning the combination of students and the staff that serve those students cannot exceed the total group size. So this is if we were able to implement pods. At the elementary school, that is very possible. At the high school, that is impossible, because students are not all taking the exact same classes throughout the day, throughout the semester, throughout the year. Students are selecting, in many cases, very individualized courses based on areas of interest, based on what they're pursuing post-secondarily. um, based on the number of electives that we offer, AP classes, honors classes. There's just so many options. And in order for us to pod students, we would basically be limiting the courses that they could select in their high school career, which we know we cannot do. So although podding is a mitigation strategy that we have been asked to consider, it is not something that we believe is possible at the secondary school for lots and lots of reasons, at the high school in particular. At the middle school, in the 8th grade, it's easier to pod for large portions of the day than it is at the high school, but it's a little bit challenging because kids in the 8th grade are able to make selections of some of their elective classes. And again, that's based on their preference. In the 7th grade, it is the easiest of all of the secondary grades. It is the easiest to keep kids in pods for large portions of the day. One of the issues that we have is that the secondary school, our secondary school, is one building. It is the 7 through 12 building. It is one bus run. So whatever we decide to do for the building, at least at the beginning stages, we're doing for everybody 7 through 12. At the elementary schools, we needed to add a second run in order for us to meet the bus capacity sizes. And in order to do that, we had to do some really creative and flexible scheduling. Sorry about that. My mother is calling me. Put her on hold. We had to do some flexible scheduling, and that means that we don't have a lot of room for additional flexible scheduling in terms of buses at the secondary. So there's one bus run at secondary, and if we are going to do one bus run, then we need to limit the number of students that could be taking the buses. Otherwise, we will exceed the capacity that is outlined in the guidance. Additionally, our priority, again, according to the guidance that was given to us from the Department of Education and the governor's office, was to bring elementary students back full-time and really work hard to get as many elementary students in, even if it meant that at the secondary level that students would be doing distance learning for at least part of the time. So the decision under partial return is that some students will be in on certain days and the rest of the students will be in, by in I mean in person, on the opposite days. And according to what we wrote, Wednesday would be a distance learning day for the district. This is again under the partial return model. Our rationale is as follows. If we have one group of students in the building on Mondays and Tuesdays, and a totally different group of students in the building on Thursdays and Fridays, and again, we're in a circumstance where the restrictions and the guidance is a little bit more advanced, then Wednesday, students can distance learn, and we have a cleaning crew that would come in and really do a comprehensive sanitizing of the building prior to entry of a brand new group of kids on the second phase of the week. As part of the partial reentry plan, and this is true across all levels in our district, we are still offering the opportunity for children who have been identified in the limited return model. So the kids that I talked about initially, the ones that are most at need, that most require in-person learning, those children will be allowed to come to school for all 4 days under the partial plan. Wednesday still being the distance learning day. So we are still providing that opportunity for the kids that are most at need, but we are limiting the number of students at the school at any given time. Here's the rationale. We cannot pod. So the next thing that we need to look at is social distancing. If our classes are full and if our buses are full, We cannot social distance. Our classrooms are not big enough, and we do not have enough large spaces for us to have entire groups of students in classrooms at any given time. And for us to implement any kind of a plan where there is significant enough social distancing. So 6 feet is the recommendation. If we can't do 6 feet, then we do 5. If we can't do 5, we do 4. The guidance is you provide as much social distancing as possible. But in small classrooms that are full, up to 25 children in some rooms, it is impossible for us to have any level of social distancing that would matter, on top of the fact that we're not potting, because that's not possible at the high school either. So by cutting the classrooms in half, basically, we are able to better social distance, and we are able to say with some degree of certainty that we can implement that mitigation strategy, which is highly recommended through the guidance that's provided to us by the Department of Health and by the Department of Ed. The next issue is the issue of masks. So again, there were 3 strategies, 3 mitigation strategies: potting, social distancing, and mask wearing. The original guidance that came from the Department of Ed and from the Department of Health was pretty lax on the issue of wearing face masks. So there were a lot of questions and a lot of feedback even while we were developing our plans. Those plans were submitted, and since that time, the governor has stated, I have not seen it in writing yet, but she has stated it in a couple of public meetings, public forums, that she is going to mandate face masks. So all of the discussions and debates that we had about face masks, when they would be required and when they would not be required, it appears that decision has been taken over by the governor's office, and that she has issued an order that students will be required to wear masks. One question that a lot of people have is, will there be exclusions to that requirement? I believe the answer is yes, but I have not seen yet the written executive order, and I have not seen any exclusions at this point, but I expect there to be some. So for example, there are certain groups of students or certain students based on health conditions that the wearing of the mask may not be appropriate. If that is the case, then there may be other mitigation strategies that we might need to put in place, like plastic barriers, those kinds of things. However, I believe that the exclusions are going to be limited. I think it's going to be a mandatory requirement, and students who cannot or will not wear their face masks, they will have to opt for distance learning, because again, it is a requirement, and it's about the health and safety of everybody else that's in the building. So that is our partial return plan. And I know there are a lot of questions in the chat room. We definitely will get to those questions. I just wanted to do a quick overview of the 3 reentry plans before we got to those questions. The final scenario is full return. And again, for the reasons that I talked about under partial return, even under full return, we cannot do potting, we cannot do social distancing. So the only way for us to put in place the level of mitigation that is necessary for plan approval, the only way for us to do that was to continue with limiting the number of students that are in the building at any given time. So the partial plan and the full reentry plan are basically the same. The only difference is that there is not a distance learning day in the middle of the week. So again, under full return, the restrictions are the least significant. So we will continue to do cleaning and sanitation throughout the day, but there will not be the need for a full comprehensive cleaning between groups of students, because students will be, that will not be necessary. So we will offer the 3rd day of in-person learning on an on an every other week basis. So if one group of kids is in on Monday and Tuesday in week 1, they would also come in on Wednesday. And then the next week, they would only come in on Monday and Tuesday, and the second group of students would add the Wednesday. So it would be an alternating Wednesday. So basically, they would attend 5 days out of 10, and they would be distance learning the other portion of the day. A lot of questions about what that means. What does that look like? While some students are in their classroom, the other students are able to join their classroom in one way or the other, the same classroom that they're in with the same teacher. So the teacher is still responsible for the full class of students, but only half of the students roughly are present for in-person learning, and the other half of the students are participating remotely. That is something that we will continue to work with teachers and provide additional support and resources for. But there are a lot of different options that individuals have talked about, including having the students be able to listen in and join in remotely on direct instruction that's being provided by the teacher. It includes the students that are at home being able to join groups in the classroom remotely. So we do not want students to be in groups working collaboratively like we typically have in the past. We need to limit interaction among students. This is an opportunity for kids to work together without worrying about social distancing and the spreading of germs, because some students can be in the classroom and some students can be on the computer, and they're able to work collaboratively in groups in that way. So I know that the teachers have been really creative in their thinking. Those are a couple of different scenarios. Other scenarios include that the teacher will provide the same lesson to students on Monday and Tuesday that they do on Thursday and Friday. And on the days that they're home, they're doing an application activity, or they're working on a project. And then when they return, the teacher will work with them on whatever questions and follow-up they have to the project that they were working on more independently. So again, lots of different scenarios, and it could be a variety of those situations. On some weeks, the teacher will have the students working collaboratively in groups. On some weeks, the teacher may allow the children to access direct instruction while the kids that are in person are learning. Other weeks, the teacher may have independent work for the students to do at home with an opportunity to ask questions and touch base. However, that's going to be really individualized based on the course, based on the teacher, and based on the delivery of material and instruction in the classroom. Okay, so the only other thing that I'm going to say before I start answering some questions is that we have also modified the schedule at the secondary schools so that students are getting out a little bit earlier than typical, and classes have been adjusted accordingly. So every class will be just a little bit shorter. And the rationale for that is that we needed the time so that we could accommodate the additional tier of busing at the elementary schools. So we could not just order 20 new buses and 20 new bus drivers. The buses don't exist, the drivers don't exist, and the funding to make all of that happen does not exist. Excuse me for 1 second. Okay, not an emergency, so I'm good now. Sorry about that. And that is identified in the reentry plan, that those times are in the schedules that are attached to the secondary school plans. But the rationale for that is we needed the time for the additional run at the elementary school. So that takes care of the 3 reentry plans. I really want to just start addressing some of the questions. I know I've addressed many of the questions that were sent in advance, but there are definitely some others that I want to get to. Okay, so how many? Yeah, go ahead.
1 minute. Barbara Wilmot asked me to remind you that, let me scroll down, that the junior senior high school will have it, because of the schedule, that there will be an hour available at the end of the day for teachers to help the at-home kids.
Yeah, so thank you, Barbara, for reminding me of that. So the students that are at home on any given day, a lot of questions about when they will be able to access their teachers for support and help. So this is on top of, if they're allowed to join in remotely during the class, listen in on instruction, work collaboratively in groups. But on top of that, if they're working independently and they have questions, they can't just call in the middle of the teacher teaching his or her classes. There's got to be a set aside time. So for the early release that accommodates the elementary busing, we are setting that time aside for the classroom teachers to be able to respond directly to the students who are learning from home on any given day. All right, so there is that built-in opportunity as well. So that's another strategy to really help understand how we're going to support students both remotely and in person who are part of the same class with the same teacher in a really kind of different scenario that helps us to address all of the safety protocols that we need to address. So thanks for reminding me of that, Barbara. All right, how many students have opted for virtual learning? That survey, we have received almost 1,400 responses. We have about 16 change students in the district. So we're super close to having, pretty much all of our parents respond. At this point, we have each of our schools personally reaching out to families who have not responded to the survey, and the secretaries or the administrators who are reaching out are recording their answers on the form so that we have a full picture of what the current thinking is around parent selection. At this point, and it's been pretty consistent throughout. So even when we only had 200 or 300 responses, it was roughly 20% of the families that were selecting full distance learning. And it is roughly evenly distributed across all grade levels. So, it varies a little bit. There might be 18% in one grade level, 22% in another grade level, but for the most part, it is 20% of families who at the time that they filled out the survey, based on their knowledge at that moment and their thinking at that moment, 1 in 5 children will be opting for full distance learning. We are going to send that survey out again. I referenced this at the beginning. And that survey, we are only asking families to respond if they wish to change their decision. And that information for us is going to be really, really critical because it will help us to identify exactly how many spots we have for offering the full in-person return to the targeted students, the students that we believe or the families believe are the ones that are most in need of increased in-person learning directly with the teacher. Okay, let me go down. All right, so question about how to raise your hand. If you look at the bottom of your screen where it says participants. So if you're looking at participants, I typically see a raise hand bar, but I don't see it. Do you see it, Marie?
I don't, Jim. So what I told the parent is they could type their questions right in the chat and we will answer them. And okay. I noticed that that's what she has been doing.
All right, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So the question about free lunches and breakfast, will they be allowed to come to school every day? So the general answer is no. That's not a prerequisite. In other words, if a family needs the breakfast and the lunch, it doesn't automatically mean that they are one of the individuals selected to go for in-person learning every day. However, if that child is identified as a child who needs it, then certainly they can come every day. If they are not coming every day, then just like we did during distance learning in the spring, we will have an opportunity for families to sign up for the free breakfast and the free lunches, and there will be a pickup opportunity and also a drop-off opportunity. So in other words, we offered families to come and pick the meals up during the last 3 months of school, and we also provided direct delivery of those meals to the homes based on parent choice. So that will continue. Okay. Okay. So part-time in person, I don't know that I'm comfortable for them being in school every day, but believe they need some in school. So that's our model, right? Every child will not be in school every day unless they've been identified as a child who would benefit the most, and there is agreement between the family and the school that's appropriate. Okay, so Mary, thank you for helping to answer some of these questions. So splitting the days between Exeter and West Greenwich, is the student population different? The split, that's one of the reasons why we looked at that model. The split is roughly 48 point something percent to 51 point something percent. So it is as close to an even split as you could possibly get. And that's why it made sense for us to divide in that way. And then the other thing that happens is we only need to run the bus routes for one town or the other. And in order for us to accommodate the bus capacity, we're taking all the runs that have higher ridership and we're splitting them in half. So for example, on an Exeter day, there are some buses that are in the Exeter that run through Exeter that will never hit the capacity that we need to monitor. So they're fine. There are other buses where the total number of riders on those buses would exceed the capacity that's in the guidance. Those bus routes will be split in half, and we'll take a West Greenwich bus that typically does a West Greenwich run for secondary, and we'll split the Exeter run in half so that half the number of kids are on the bus and we meet the capacity. It will also allow us to have a certain number of buses that are free during the secondary runs so that we can send them to the opposite town to pick up the children who have been identified for in-person learning all days, right? So even if it's an off day for that town, if your child is coming all 4 days or all 5 days, we still have the capacity to provide bus transportation to and from school by using those buses that are not required to split some of the runs in the other town in half because ridership is low on some of our buses. Okay. All right, so the issue about iPads and Chromebooks, particularly for junior high school students. So we know that when we moved to upgrade all of our technology needs, every school made decisions around technology based on their needs. And the junior high school works really well with iPads, but a lot of families had some pretty significant struggles with the iPads with distance learning. So what we ended up doing during the last 3 months of school is we have a supply of devices, and we basically loaned them out to any family that requested the devices. We had several families that are in the junior high school who did not have any devices at home other than the iPads that the children receive as part of their work at the junior high school, as part of their coursework. So we loan them out, and we will continue to do that. So if we know that that is an issue and that's something that is a preference for you, then when the time comes, when we are ready to start distributing devices, make sure that you put your request in so that we can get that taken care of for you. We have taken care of our supply of loaner devices. That is something that we did really early in the budgetary process to make sure that we were prepared for distance learning and that we had the devices to loan out to families. By the time we were underway with distance learning in the spring, we were close to 100% of our families having access to the technology. The only issues that we had were some families that live deep in the woods and there's no service providers. And we tried everything, including hotspots. We purchased hotspots. We did a lot of things to get as many people connected as we could. And in the cases where we were not 100% successful, then we looked at some paper copies and delivery of materials where it was appropriate. So again, just know that that is an option for you. Okay. All right, so if you choose the distance learning option, how long is that option valid or available for? Do we just wait until the Department of Health states it's safe to go back full-time without social distancing and face masks? So if the Department of Health says everything is fine and all kids can return to school and we have a vaccine and everything is back to normal, then all kids would return to school and all teachers would return to school. However, we understand that some families are going to make a choice and they're going to start the school year, and then circumstances might change, and so the request is going to be to move back to full-time or vice versa, or they started in school in person and they want full-time distance learning. At the secondary level, that is a fairly easy thing to do, because the children are going to be participating as part of a class that the teacher is teaching, and the teacher will always have some children in the classroom and some children participating from home. And then there is a handful of kids that will be participating from home as part of that class every day. So if the student wants to move from distance learning to participating in the classroom, that's a fairly easy thing to do. And vice versa. Again, it's a fairly easy thing to do, but parents need to understand and students need to understand that that option allows them to participate with their teacher, but there is no direct instruction, face-to-face instruction. They have access, they have the ability to communicate with that teacher during the 1 hour that they have at the end of the day, but that's the schedule, right? And by the way, distance learning worked really, really well for a number of our students. So that could be a great option. It is not a great option for every student. So just be really thoughtful about the decisions that we're making for kids in terms of how often they are in school for a face-to-face learning. Okay. All right. So lots of conversation about laptops and iPads. How will students who refuse to wear masks be addressed? I think I said that at the beginning. Since it's going to be an executive order of the governor that it's a requirement, all students must wear face masks. If they refuse to wear face masks, it's not a matter of discipline. It's just a matter of if you can't follow the rules for in-person learning, this is a matter of health and safety of not just the other students, but the staff as well, they can't follow the rules, they'll have to participate fully in distance learning. And that's going to be our stance. All right, so good question about mask wearing when they are or are not able to maintain the 6 feet of separation. So the original guidance said masks would be required when students were not able to maintain 6 feet of social distancing for extended periods of time. And so that's the kind of premise that we were working off of. There are still a lot of individuals, families, staff members, and even other children who are uncomfortable with that. There are a lot of people that are uncomfortable being around others who are not wearing a face mask. And I think the governor got a lot of pressure from a lot of different groups, and that's where the executive order came from. It is possible that in the executive order, again, I stated I have not seen it. It has not been released to us in writing. When it is released to us, I will share it. It is possible that there will be some exclusions for certain individual students based on health conditions. It is possible that there could be some exclusions. In other words, there have to be times during the school day where there can be breaks from wearing face masks for kids and for adults. I know when I go to the grocery store, by the time I'm done, I've had just about enough. So it's going to be a real challenge for everybody, for the adults and for the children. There have to be times built into the day where they can have breaks from the face masks. When is that appropriate? We thought we had it figured out, but now we need to see what the executive order states, and we need to work around that. So I know that the face mask issue has been a topic of conversation. We spent a lot of time in the reentry groups talking about it. But now that some of the rules have changed, we just need to look at our decisions and match them to what the governor is suggesting in her order. And we need to make different decisions if those things don't match. So I don't want to answer the question until I have all of the information, which is just not available to us yet at this time. All right. So will the non-in-person days, this is from YouTube, for partial return, will the non-in-person days also be distance learning, meaning 2 days in person and 3 days at home? Yes. So again, the student is still enrolled in classes. Those classes meet 5 days a week. They are participating in the classroom in the partial return model 2 days a week, and distance learning the other 3 days, Wednesday being distance learning for all. And then the opposite group of students is doing the opposite. They're participating in class when the original child that we talked about is at home, and vice versa. So again, there's always half the number of students in the classroom, half the number of students at home, but they are still part of the same class with the same teacher, just participating differently. It's basically like having a distance learning platform with the benefit of half of the kids having direct access to the teacher for in-person learning. That's how we're looking at it. Okay.
Excuse me, Jim.
Yes.
There's someone who's had a hand raised for a while. Laura, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead, Laura Gardner, ask your question.
Hi, I think the iPad question was more, instead of iPads, could the junior high use Chromebooks?
So in other words, as the technology device at that school.
Yeah, I don't think it was meant that couldn't get them and borrowing them from the school. I think in terms of distance learning, the iPads aren't as good.
Yeah.
Hi, Jim, if you want to, this is Mary, the junior high principal. I just wanted to take a minute. Figure it's easier than having Jim try to go around. A couple of the concerns are that we have created several plans using the iPads, and while the Chromebooks are great for distance learning, The iPads are certainly something that we have found to be much more beneficial for in-person learning, as well as with the math in particular. All of the math teachers really stressed how great it was to have the iPads to be able to do the writing and to see the work right there on the iPads. And so because we're not really building this going forward for just distance learning, we are hoping that someday we will have you all back in the building and have you with us. We are hoping that we decided to stick with the iPads and make the Chromebooks available for students as needed. And hopefully some people will be able to take advantage of that. But we found that as an overall, the iPads were still pretty beneficial, given all of the different things that we do on the iPads going forward, in, again, the hopes that we would not be distance learning forever.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So children with IEPs, otherwise being recommended for the 4 days in person, will they get transportation even if it's not their town's day? So I think I addressed that probably after you wrote the question. That's Michelle. Are you good with that answer, Michelle? All set with that now? I'll assume yes. Okay. Teachers are going to work on providing students with mask breaks throughout the day. This would be when students can be outside and or 6 feet apart. So thanks for saying that, Mary. One of the things that we've talked a lot about is utilizing outdoor space to the degree that it is possible, because the guidance that we're receiving suggests that outdoors is always better than indoors. The outdoor group size is larger than the indoor group size. So if there are opportunities for students to be outside, to learn outside, to eat outside, we are going to provide those opportunities. And that would be an ideal time for mask breaks to occur. Again, as long as it is consistent with the executive order of the governor, which I've yet to see in writing. So I assume that that's going to be a great time for those breaks to occur. But again, I want to make sure that it's consistent with what the governor is suggesting. Yeah, so any individual family needs, so there's a parent that's posting about a child who has some anxiety and might want to come into the school ahead of time to see things like has occurred in previous schools and in previous grade levels. We are still doing that. And the suggestion is, if you have an individual family need, an individual child need, to communicate directly with the principal, who will help you to set that up. I just have a request, and we're just saying that, yes, these things can happen, but we need to implement, there's got to be social distancing. People should wear masks when they're in the building. We do not want there to be touching of anything in the building, because our custodial staff has worked really, really hard to make sure that every single area of the school is fully sanitized and ready for opening. And so it's hard for us to continue to go back and clean everything. So we just want to be really careful about touching and about, and again, implementing all the other strategies for safety. But we can set those meetings up. If you just call the principal, she'll help you to do that, okay? And core classes at the junior high level. So again, the special education teacher will continue to provide direct services. And on the days when the children are in person, they will receive those direct services. And on the days when they're not in person, if they're not in person, because obviously many of our children with special education needs are going to be targeted for full return, so they will always have access to the special educator. If it is appropriate for a child with special education needs to do the 2 days on and 2 days off, then the likelihood is that they don't need the same degree of services by the special education teacher. So it will be possible to meet all of those needs in a schedule that is provided for that child. But again, we would anticipate that many of the children with identified needs are going to be offered the full return as part of that grouping of students, that targeted grouping of students that we talked about. Okay. All right, so actually this has come up a couple of times around supply lists. So I've seen different supply lists for junior high school on the school site. In the return plan, will we get a supply list, or where do we refer to? So I did ask the three elementary principals to work on a supply list and get that out because we want to make sure that parents have the right list and that they have it early. And I'll tell you that the supply list is going to include some additional things. Some of those additional things will be, if you can, please send in additional wipes. If you can, please send in, those kinds of things. So we will take those donations. We have done an incredible amount of ordering. We have a $55,000 Clorox wipe order that we are awaiting arrival on. So we have a lot of things, but I don't think that we will ever have enough. So we will ask parents to send in certain supplies, but we will also have supplies on there that if you could, we would appreciate additional support with certain things. So I did ask the elementary principals to work on that. Mary, could you work on that with your teams? And the high school is a little bit different because it's on a class-by-class basis. And one of the things that I referenced in the return plan is that there's going to be a standard template that we share with all families for each class around distance learning expectations, since every kid will be participating, or most kids will be participating to one degree or another. So there will be some expectations, the supplies, everything will be included on that standard template, and those will all go out right at the beginning of the school year. All right. All right, sports. Lots of questions about sports, and some of those questions came in ahead of time as well. So that's a tricky question to answer. There was an announcement that was made today, I believe, or it might have been yesterday, by the governor. And again, she's working closely with schools, and she's working closely with the Department of Health, and she's working closely with the Interscholastic League. The only sports right now that are cleared for return, if we return.
Excuse me, Jim, I think you just cut out.
So again, I anticipate that that we will be returning to school. The only sports that are currently cleared under the current circumstances of all of the other sports have not yet been. Okay.
Jim?
So what did you not hear, Marie? The sports,
all
the
of
names of the sports?
Right. It all.
Yeah. Yes. Hello.
Hello. Yep. Try again. No, we cannot hear you.
Hello.
Yep. No, I try again. I could hear that.
All right. Let me know if this is better. I'm going to try.
No.
I'm going to try again.
No.
And if this doesn't, okay.
Marie, can you hear me? This is
I
Sue.
can, yes, I can.
Because I can speak
All
to,
right.
I know that the
Let me know if it
Interscholastic
gets better.
is going to be
Sue?
making an announcement. I believe it's the 17th.
All
I
right,
put it
hold
in the
on.
chat.
Hold on, Sue.
Okay.
If there are any other users using your hotspot, that would negatively impact your service, Jim.
There's nobody else using it. Did you hear me?
No, it just sounds like you're speaking in slow motion.
Okay. All right, let me,
Do you want to log off and try logging back on?
You could also dial in, Jim.
That's a good idea. I'll text him, Jeremy. Just to keep everybody updated, Jim has asked me to send the dial info. So if you could just hang in there for a minute.
While you're waiting for him though, tennis and cross country, boys and girls, are the sports that are running that we have approval from the Interscholastic League. They're going to make further decisions August 17th. Does anybody have any specific questions that you'd want to ask Mrs. Slattery and myself by any chance? While we're waiting for the superintendent?
I do.
Go right ahead. We'll see what we can do.
I'm just curious to see how lunch will be handled. And one other question I had was, I know he touched base on it, but if we choose to send kids to school, can we change our mind, you know, once they're there, if it's not working out for some reason? Can we do distance learning?
I will speak for the high school, and I will tell you that we will always work with parents and families and students to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest for the learner. So, you know what, I would say, you know, select what you feel is best, and if we need to change it, we'll change it. We'll do our best to work with it.
Same thing at the
Okay, thank
high
you.
school. We will also work with anybody, and it's a fluid thing. While it's easier, clearly, if we know, we will be able to work with that. There was a question in here looking at classes being held outside, and at the junior high school, we are attempting to pod. So each pod will have an outside space that's dedicated just to them, so that they will be able to go outside at any time with any of their teachers to that one space that is their space, which will hopefully give them an opportunity to have mask breaks and to be able to do some work outside. And hopefully we'll have some nice weather come the fall.
In any high school or even junior high parents, I'm not sure, that are on, if anybody, while we're waiting as well, if anyone happens to have any textbooks at home that you still have from last year, we would love to have them back at the high school. I know that. And if you happen to be driving by, you can leave them right in a bag at the loading dock. Or you can email me and I can let you know of another place that you can drop them off. But we really are in need of the old textbooks.
Parent drop-off, to address John's question, parents will be able to drop off their children for sure. We will just, at the junior high school, we're going to have a separate entrance. Typically, the buses come across the front. The junior high students will come around to the side, where we typically have had parent drop-off in that way. And so they'll be able to get in that direction. So that will work out just fine as far as doing drop-off or pickup. And the same thing will happen. Students will be walked out by their teachers at the end of the day. Any student who will be going home with their parents will exit through the junior high entrance, the specific junior high entrance, where the other students will walk out to where the buses are. And as far as in the choice between Spanish, French, and art and band for that, so at this point, there will be no impact on if they have Spanish, French, and art. We are working on several different models with the specialists. They know that some students will be home on certain days, some students will be home on all days. And band, I'm not sure if you saw earlier, I have been working closely with Mr. Shrest and Mr. Runner on ways to make band and chorus. Clearly, we're not going to be playing any instruments or singing in person at this point, but that would be something that they are working on as far as being able to work with students to have some type of distance opportunity to do that and continue to keep up their music skills.
As far as the question on whether or not students doing distance learning, can they participate in extracurricular activities? Absolutely. But if they are running, if they're on distance learning, they absolutely can participate. Matter of fact, we would love that.
The question regarding, does the district know the RIDO requirement yet for 6 students to return to in-person learning? And will a negative COVID test be required? You may have heard today on the news that the Rhode Island Department of Health will be providing what they call a playbook for schools. We have been eagerly anticipating this playbook, and the answers, I know there were a lot of questions submitted to the superintendent regarding safety protocols, and we will be following the Department of Health playbook, which lists all of those protocols. We just have not seen what they are yet. And once we know what they are, that we will be communicating that to staff and to families.
As for the parent who just commented on middle school students who opting for distance learning, right now we're looking at numbers. And if they're, right now I have about 18 or 19 students in 7th grade and about the same number in 8th grade of students who would be choosing to do distance learning. What I would do is they would be their own pod, and therefore they would always be taught in a distance learning model as the teachers rotate through their classrooms. one classroom would be a full distance learning model. And so therefore their entire class would be taught more similar to the way things were taught this past spring. And they would be able to do all of their activities and collaborative activities that way. It might look a little different for the students who are in French or Spanish or art, because we won't be able to create a specific class of just those students. But the foreign language teachers in particular have definitely been looking at ways to incorporate synchronous and asynchronous learning, and having a student who's in class be able to partner with a student at home, because we really don't want them speaking too close to each other in person anyway. So having them do some meets or chats or something like that in order to help them to do that. So chances are they would be their own pod for the most part, and then we would be able to incorporate them into their other specials virtually, depending on how that works.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
All right, I'm back
Say a few
on.
more things.
I'm back on. I'm on my phone.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yes, it is. And
All
we've
right.
answered some of the questions in the
Oh.
chat.
I've been listening. I have a very well-informed group of partners.
Okay, good.
Yep, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
For the
I'm glad that you talked about the playbook, because there were a bunch of questions relative to.
You're a little muffled, Jim.
I don't know what else to do.
That sounded better.
All right, so I'm going to keep the phone really close to me then, and you tell me if things get bad.
It sounds good now. Sounds good.
All right. So the playbook that Marie was talking about is really important. I would say that roughly 1/3 of all questions that we've been receiving have to do with, what happens if? What if a staff member tests positive? What if a classmate tests positive? What do we do if a child has symptoms during the school day? All of those answers we were really vague about in our reentry plan, because we know that the Department of Health, who wants every single school district to react to those kinds of situations in precisely the same way, and in the way that is recommended by health experts, they are creating the playbook that is basically an if-then scenario, right? So if this happens, then, and they bullet out all of the steps that the school is required to take. Our stance is that we're going to follow. So every single question related to what will we do if or when something occurs, we're going to refer to the playbook. That playbook was supposed to be released to us before we submitted our plan on July 17th. And I think I heard Marie say that the actual date of release is scheduled now tomorrow. So once that playbook comes out, we are going to post it on our site. We post it on our website under the COVID tab on the main page of our website. And anybody that hasn't gone to that tab, every single communication that I have sent out to the community members is archived there. All of the resources are archived there, so the playbook will be posted as well. And that is a place where a lot of you might want to look. Because again, we're going to follow the guidance of the All right. So I kind of lost my place in terms of questions. But
Okay, so let me scroll through and see which ones have not been. Jim, there are questions about the HVAC system and about whether we'll be looking at options for trying to have some cooling window ACs.
So I don't know the answer to that question for a couple of reasons. That question came up yesterday as well. We know that we have some classrooms that have very limited access to outside. There's limited windows or no windows at all. To the extent possible, we are moving classrooms so that we're utilizing those rooms in the least, if at all, we need to use those rooms the least amount. So if we need to relocate to bigger spaces or different spaces, then that is something that we're looking at across all of our buildings. In terms of air conditioning units and fans, we actually have some conflicting information. So there are some concerns about using air conditioning and fans because if we have all students facing in the same direction, which is what the guidance suggests, and a fan is blowing back at the individual student, then any molecules that are released just through talking could get blown back in the face of somebody else. So that is a concern. We have also heard that that certain units are acceptable. So because the information is conflicting, it's hard for us to confirm one way or the other what the answer is. That's actually on our list of questions that needs clarification from the powers that be above us. So I can't really answer that question at this point. If we are not allowed to have fans, some classrooms will be hot, and there's not a lot that I can do about that.
Okay, Jim, there's questions about, is August 17th also the decision date for extracurricular activities such as drama club, etc.? And also a question about PE, if it will be handled be outside when possible.
So I only heard the first part of the question, so let me answer that first.
Okay.
So August 17th is the date that the Interscholastic League is going to release additional information, which I believe Mrs. Chandler addressed. August 17th is also the target date that we're hearing for the governor to make the decision about which reentry plan we will be implementing. So I want to be really clear about that. The final decision, are we going full distance learning, limited in person, partial, or full? That final decision is not mine. That will come from the governor's office, and that is expected on the 17th of August. The question about extracurricular activities is again a tricky question because people that have been following our situation understand that the budget that was proposed was rejected by the towns, and the towns have voted to level fund their prior year contribution, and the state has cut us $812,000 in state aid. And because the towns are level funding their contribution, it means that my operating budget for this school year, the one that we're currently in, that started on July 1st, is over $600,000 less than it was the previous year. During a time when we need more money than ever before because of all of these things that we need to implement. So our budgetary situation is awful at this point. At next Tuesday's school committee meeting, they need to balance the budget based on potential reductions. And if I'm being completely honest, extracurricular activities and some athletic activities are on the list. And that is because we believe that in many cases, they're going to be cut for us. So the Department of Health is going to say that certain activities can't run, and that will produce a savings. But we are definitely going to have to limit some of the extracurricular activities. It has nothing to do with an August 17th date because we can offer some of these things virtually if we need to. It has to do with what we have the money to fund. So if you're interested in learning more about this issue and what is decided upon, what is ultimately decided upon, I would suggest that people participate in the school committee meeting, which is going to be next Tuesday evening, starting at 6 o'clock.
Okay, there was a question of the second part of that, Jim, is that there's a question about PE. Will that be held and will it be outdoors when possible?
Yes.
Okay. Then there's another question about, will a parent be able to drop off their son or daughter at the school in the morning without having to take the bus?
Yes, I think Mary addressed that question. I heard her talking about it, so yes.
Okay. Hold on. Hold on. The question about, will Exeter West Greenwich be following the state calendar? Did the hybrid model take the quote off days into account when separating students by district in order to be equitable?
So the state calendar was designed based on a full return. So one of the things that we considered is whether it made sense for us to stick with the Monday days, because there's a lot of Monday days that are off, or to move to the Wednesday. So in the partial return model, it made sense because we had two different groups of students, one group on Monday and Tuesday and one group on Thursday and Friday. And that middle day in between the different groups of students and the weekend in between the different groups of students provided a great opportunity for full resanitizing and re-cleaning. So that is why that decision was made. But again, the state calendar is based on a full return. If we have, if we don't have a full return, then it is possible that we could make an adjustment to that. However, just know that even if we stick with the Wednesday day as the virtual day for all, we have looked at the calendar to make sure that there are adjustments for equity. So there may be certain weeks where the schedule is different so that there is an equitable number of days for both towns. So that is something that we have considered.
Okay, we have someone on the phone with a raised hand, phone number 172. I'm going to unmute you. Phone number that ends in 172.
I asked my question a little while ago to Mrs. Chambliss, so I think I'm all set. Unless do we know how we're handling lunches right now?
Yeah, Sue, do you want to address that or do you want me to?
I'm sorry, I missed it. I was answering a question or typing. What was the question?
Question about how lunches.
What we are going to do, we're going to do 3 lunches. We're going to use 2 different cafeterias and the outside lunches. So we shouldn't have any problem as far as spacing or having the kids have room for lunches.
So this is Dr. Slattery again. With the partial plan, we will be okay with the lunches. We have the ability to use the lunches as well at the cafeteria as well as the gymnasium. It will not be used for indoor PE. So therefore, we will have enough space to have the pods appropriately separated when they're in the cafeteria.
There are a couple of questions, Jim, about whether there will be temperature checks every day for students and teachers who go into school.
So that is a requirement that we have temperature checks, but a lot of, so that's the attestation form that was talked about in the reentry plan. Parents will need to submit that they have checked for all of the symptoms. There is a form that we've filled out, and that it is safe for the child to return to school, or safe for the child to get on the bus. So that is one way that could happen. The other way is if we don't have that form, then we will be doing temperature checks. There is still some conversation about whether we're going to do temperature checks for everybody anyway, even if the parents do the attestation at home. So if we have the supplies to be able to do it, which I'm hearing that we will, the governor's office and the Department of Health have actually ordered some supplies for us, including thermometers that would be appropriate for that. We're supposed to pick them up the week of the 17th. So that would help us to be able to do an additional round of temperature checking upon arrival. So that is the plan.
Okay. Let's see.
I see some questions about testing of staff and students. We have not been told that that will be a requirement for reentry. So although it continues to be a conversation, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a requirement for some staff. I wouldn't be surprised that, because there has been a requirement for other staff in other professions, but that has not come out at this point. So again, that's part of the playbook, and we will just follow the guidance that is provided to us by the Department of Health.
Okay, there's a question. If a child is remote learning, can they participate real time and be involved in any class discussion or ask questions?
So if they're in distance learning, can they what? Can they participate in?
Hold on, I was scrolling down from the question. I have to go back.
I think I answered that, Marie, but I can elaborate a little bit.
Okay.
So our plan is that we would like the kids to be on even when they're at home. And in most cases, the teachers will be able to interact, and they would be able to interact as if they were a separate, group within the classroom. However, if the teacher decides to go outdoors, or if there's something, if there's some strange thing going on, they may, that might end up interfering with that.
Okay, thank you. If a distance learning kid decides to go back in person, would busing still be available?
Yes.
There's a question here, and the answer is the playbook, but if there is an outbreak of illness in Exeter West Greenwich, does the school get to make the decision to shut down, or does that have to come from the state?
So we would need to work with the Department of Health, and they are making the calls on that. So that's what happened all last year. Whenever there was an outbreak in any school, the Department of Health made the call. But they make the call very, very quickly based on the information. There's a whole protocol around communication with the Department of Health. Our nurses are involved with that. So yes, the Department of Health makes the call, but they will do it very quickly, and the communication will go out to the families very quickly as well.
Okay. About how many students will be placed in a classroom with distance learning?
So that's going to depend, because again, students are in different classes all day long. So while we have 20%, roughly 20% at each grade level who have opted for distance learning, there is really no rhyme or reason behind how many of the children who have opted for distance learning are enrolled in any particular class on any given day. So it'll vary from classroom to classroom, from period to period. There's just no way to predict.
Okay.
At the elementary school, we're able to spread them out because they're in one room basically the entire day. At the high school and at the middle school, we can do a decent job of addressing that. But at the high school, it's just not possible. It really just depends on the courses that the children who have opted for distance learning have selected to take.
Okay. When will the bus schedule come out?
So I spoke again with the bus company today, and I need to meet with him one more time because there are some decisions that still have to be made around elementary. But I'm just going to put this out there because there's a lot of rumors that are happening relative to the start of school. We are scheduled for a return date of August 31st. But yesterday on my call with elementary parents, there was some chatter about, are we going to start later? Because we know that some of our surrounding states have postponed the start date of school. I'm just going to throw this out there. I would not be surprised if some announcement of that nature was made in the very near future, which would give some additional time. But the issue about busing, the bus company has a lot of work to do, and I have not given them all the details that they need in order to develop the bus routes. Again, that has to do with some of the elementary decisions and some of the feedback that we got from the Department of Ed. But he will begin working on that next week. And as soon as the bus runs are available, they're going to come out, but they will come out in plenty of time prior to the start of school. And again, just know that there is the possibility, so stay tuned. I can't guarantee it because I haven't heard it with my own ears, but stay tuned, listen closely to announcements from the governor, and I'll follow up with communication from my office as well, that there may be a postponement to the start of school. That's what's out there.
Jim, there's another busing question. If a parent can get their kids to school in the morning, but not sure about the afternoon.
No problem.
If she finds a way to get them picked up so they don't have to take the bus, who would the parent contact to inform that there's a change in the bus need?
So it's a little bit easier at the high school level and junior high school level. Really, I think the process is to just let, I don't even know that they let anybody know. Am I right on that, Mary? At the junior high school, do the parents let you know if a child is taking the bus in the morning or in the afternoon? Maybe she jumped off. I would simply just send a note in on the first day or send an email to the principal so that she can make note of it. But it is pretty simple. The bus stops are already designated. So if the child is on the bus, the stop happens. If the child is not on the bus, the stop will not happen. That's it. No problem at all. That happens all the time.
Okay. How many people will be allowed into the school committee meeting?
As many as want to join.
It's virtual, correct?
Correct.
Have the classrooms been rearranged as per social distancing guidelines? Are there physical barriers on the desk to facilitate social distancing?
So there has been a lot of work that's been done. There's been measuring of classrooms in many of the rooms. We're removing items that are not necessary so that we can maximize the amount of space in between children. So barriers are only being used in certain locations, or if a child is working one-on-one directly with a support specialist. So again, we have barriers, but they're being targeted for certain populations in certain classrooms. If we can maintain an appropriate level of social distance in the classroom, then we're not providing barriers. It's not necessary.
Okay. Let me scroll down. Will we know the full details on how each of the options will look prior to the next survey regarding our choice of learning option being sent out?
So what I described is how it's going to look, except if a decision is made about adjusting the distance day.
Okay. I think.
So that's for the secondary schools. The elementary schools, and I was really clear about this with the parents that joined yesterday, that there are absolutely some things that are up in the air. And I've been gathering feedback from the elementary parents so that the right decision can be made. They need a lot more specific information before they can make a final decision. But there are not going to be significant adjustments to the plan that was submitted to the Department of Ed for secondary, because that plan was approved as submitted.
Okay, and there were a couple of junior high school questions that I think that Mary answered. I think that brings us to the end. Oops, hold on. How will the two more questions just came in. How will the distancing be handled in the halls when passing to the next class for senior high?
So we are going to have them going in one direction, but we're also going to have them in between. So the kids are pretty good once we explain how we want things done and train them a little bit. You know, they're pretty, I have no doubt that they will be good with it. Plus, we only have half the population there, so that's going to help too.
Okay, and then at this moment, is there a possible date or time high school students will receive their schedules for the school when they are doing full distance learning?
The schedules should be coming out as they usually do, which is usually about a week before, but I'm going to have Mrs. Main send out an email soon to let them know all those kinds of details. So I think she's wrapping everything up now on the schedule. So we expect they'll be going out around the usual time, which is usually a good week and a half before school starts.
Great, thank you, Sue.
You're
Then
welcome.
what is the sanitizing protocol for bathrooms and classrooms?
So we actually we have a checklist for classrooms about what needs to be sanitized between groups of students. We have supplies that will be available in every classroom. I imagine that in many cases the students will help participate in, and they will need to help participate in cleaning off their materials. Anything that was shared, and we're going to do very limited sharing of materials, that's for sure. But they will need to wipe off their desks before they enter class, when they leave class, so everybody will participate in that process. In terms of bathrooms, we are going to have additional staff. That is one of the requirements that we need to meet. So we have to have additional cleaning and sanitizing staff. The maintenance director has identified what all of those needs are, and there's a regular sanitizing of each of the bathrooms that will be utilized, and then we have to have checklists in the bathrooms as well, so that when kids use the sink, they need to wipe down. On top of the people that we hire, we need the kids to help us to do that as well. So that's something that the maintenance department worked really hard on. We have all of the cleaning supplies in stock already, and we have additional staff that is being identified as we speak.
Okay, so I think questions for you. Will the kids still be able to make schedule changes if needed prior to the start of school?
I would say they should probably, That's a yes and no. There's not going to be, I know that Mrs. Main is trying to get them solids because it's a lot easier than for planning purposes. So I would say if students, and that's part of the email that will go out from her, is her letting them know that if they think they have a need right now, they should probably let her know, Mrs. Main know. So I'll be in touch with her and I'll have her send out something regarding the schedule to the kids. But once we get them out, it's not going to be as easy to change as we have in the past. However, I do want you to know that if a student has a particular need or some challenge, they should let me know too. I will help kids. We want to individualize as much as we can.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah.
Will the school nurse have additional help?
So we actually have a possibility of adding some additional nursing support. I wouldn't necessarily say it will only be at the junior senior high school, but there is a support person in the health office at the junior senior high school that has been strictly assigned to the junior senior high school. Actually, we did it this past year and we'll continue into next year as well. So there is an additional staff member in that office already.
Okay, we have a question from YouTube. Is it possible for the teachers to stay in touch with parents if students begin to slip during distance learning? The parent is concerned that she works full time and there will be no monitoring at home.
So the answer is yes, 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 but not just the teachers too. We have a lot of support staff. We have the guidance counselors. We have, we have a lot of people that will keep in touch, including myself. So we will be paying attention, especially to the students that are doing the distance learning. And the teachers are really good about that. But we also, there'll be a lot of people, a lot of adults that are going to try to really hone in on the kids that are struggling.
Thank you. Will there be a requirement for families to confirm that they do not have a sick person at home for students who come to school?
So again, there is the attestation form that each family must fill out. If there are 6 individuals at home, that is going to be part of the playbook that we're expecting to receive tomorrow. So that if this happens, then what is the scenario? If there is a COVID positive individual at home, what is the expectation around quarantine for the family? What is the expectation around notification of the school? All of that stuff is outlined in the playbook, what we're hearing. So I would prefer to hold off on addressing any questions related to, what if relative to a health issue until that playbook is released, because we haven't even had a chance to see it yet. If there are questions that are not answered in the playbook, then, I certainly can try to get clarification, and the nurses will help me to get clarification through their contacts at the Department of Health as well. But I'm going to hold off on trying to provide any direct answers to those questions until I see what the guidance is, and that just hasn't happened yet.
I believe the next question is also a question. We're going to wait to see the playbook. The question is there a training plan in place for school staff to handle the COVID situation in the school?
Yeah, so there are actually, so again, we may not know what the full, what the steps are that we're required to take until we see the playbook, although our nurses have a pretty decent idea of what those steps will be. But there are days prior to the start of school for children that we are with staff. And during those days, we are going to spend a lot of time making sure that everybody is clear about all of the protocols that are in place for safety and response to the various scenarios. That's the reason why we have those days prior to the start of students. And I suspect, again, this is just a guess, but if there is an announcement that school is postponed, I believe that part of the reason for the postponing of school, again, if that happens, is to provide additional days for staff to be in school to ensure that all the training is addressed before kids arrive. So that is absolutely going to happen, no question about it. The training is going to happen. The postponing, not so sure, but the training is absolutely going to happen.
And that is the last question I see in the chat. I do not see any other hands raised.
All right.
No more
All right,
questions
so
from YouTube either.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. So a couple of follow-ups. We are going to be posting the playbook, hopefully tomorrow when that is released. We are waiting to get the official mask statement from the governor. We'll post that as well. There is going to be an email that goes out to families at the beginning of next week with any updates. So there are still things that we're learning, and as we learn these things, we'll get them out to people. But at a minimum, we are going to have the request for families to submit the name of their child for in-person learning every day. You know, if there's an academic or social emotional reason, then you fill out that form, and we'll be in touch with you for communication so we can consult on that and make a decision. And we are also going to send out the survey question, and we'll do that at the right time once all the information is released. But we're going to send out the question about opting for distance learning or in-person learning. And we are only expecting people to answer that question if they're changing their mind from the previous response that they provided. So at a minimum, those things will be going out next week. And then any new information that we have, we'll get that out to you as well. All right. Unless there's anything else, I think we've done the best we could tonight. I apologize for the technical difficulty. I don't know what happened, but maybe the next time I have a forum, I'll actually have real internet in my house and we won't have another windstorm that knocks out power. So that's my hope. All right. Thank you so much for participating. We'll be in touch.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.